show up at Claremont's
Yes.
email. And so then we can download it from there and distribute it.
Great.
For those of you who live at Pilgrim Place, we will, you may want to pass the word that we will post this to our video page that's on our campus portal. And the church will also make it available through their media. The church normally puts these up on YouTube.
Well, it's 3 minutes. Yes, thank you. It's 3 minutes after, and so we will begin. My name is Jane Heckles, and I'm a member of the board of Adult Ed that sponsors the Sunday Morning Forum. So I want to welcome you to our usual 9 a.m. program on Sunday mornings. Come anytime, any week. During this presentation, if you have questions, don't hesitate to use the chat function to record those questions, and there'll be time toward the end of our time together for Jean and for Rizek to handle those questions. Also, during the time of the presentation, I'm going to add a couple of links to the United Church of Christ website to show you the General Synod resolution that Jean and Rizek will discuss, and some other programming that the UCC is offering on the same topic. So unless there are any other technical questions, I think, Jean, we'll pass it on to you to begin.
I'm Jean Boutillier. I'm a member of the Board of Mission and Social Action, and I'm a close neighbor and a friend to Alice and Rizek Abusharr. When we planned this forum a couple of months ago to discuss a resolution before the General Synod on justice and the relationship between Israel and Palestine, we of course had no clue as to the current events. But the current events, of course, are part of decades and decades and decades of similar troubles. Yesterday was the 72nd year of the catastrophe, the Nakba. And so with overwhelming sadness and frustration, we find ourselves once again in the midst of a serious escalation in violence in this long-standing conflict. Children are hiding in shelters, families are grieving, lives are being destroyed disproportionately, lives of civilian Palestinian people, including lots of children. The context for this hearing, today, is that soon, in 55 days, the United Church of Christ national setting is having a General Synod, the top meeting of the gathering of delegates from the churches of the United Church of Christ. It'll be from July 11th to 18th. We are, as a congregation, promoting attendance because it will be virtual and you can attend from your home. There are scholarships available and assistance in registering from the church. It will be an occasion with worship and events and exhibits and keynotes and the business of our denomination. The worship is very inspiring and carefully prepared, and this is United Church of Christ, like this congregation at its best. There will be some witness resolutions. There's one on cash bail, one on conversion therapy, one on Hawaiian history, and other topics. Racism is a public health issue. But the one that we're going to discuss today is a resolution on justice between Israel and Palestine. And we'll talk about the resolution itself in a few minutes, but let's start right now, even before we talk about the lives of Alice and Rizek and introduce them. Rizek, would you help us talk specifically about the current tragic news events of the last week as Ramadan comes to a close and as we experience this in continuation of the catastrophe, the evictions, the resistance, the attacks on the mosque, the violent crackdown, a little bit of perspective. What a challenge in a time that is brief, but we're asking you to do that for us, friend.
Thank you, Gene. Yesterday was the 73rd anniversary of the Nakba, which is the great catastrophe that Palestinians call. It takes me back to 1948 when I was 12 years old. Early in May, we and the our family were not expelled from our home, but we opted to take refuge in a nearby convent because there were so many massacres around the area of Jerusalem perpetrated by some left-wing organizations of the so-to-be established Jewish state. So we took some few essentials, including some food for a week or two, bedding and things like that, to the nearby convent where both my sisters were students and student teachers. And they really received us and gave us 2 rooms together with another family that were next door to us. And we were in hiding for 3 months with the little meager supplies that we took for 2 weeks. But the nuns fed us and kept us safe because the authorities were searching for my father and Mr. Miskawi, my friend's father, to take to concentration camp. And this is what was being done in the early days. There were 2 large concentration camps in what is now Israel, one in Beit Shemesh and one in Atlit near Haifa. So we hid and they were searching for us diligently. Once a week or twice a week, they would come and ring the bell of the church of the convent that had a huge wall circling the whole thing. And the nuns would quickly push a huge cupboard against the wall of the rooms that we occupied. There were 4 males in the group and 12 females in the other room. And we were hiding there until the soldiers left. They were searching in the kitchen, in the bathrooms, everywhere, anyhow. So that stayed on. After 3 months of the second truce, what occurred in July, mid-July, we were asked by the American Consul General, who was then a very good neighbor of the convent, where they had rented quarters in the convent for the Marines. He said, now a census is being taken and you should come out and be counted. The Israeli government was just being established and they wanted to make a census. So we marched out after the nuns were counted. Pictures were taken and identification cards were given. I was mentioning yesterday that the number of identity that I have is 100,581. So I was one of the early registered citizens of the new state of Israel. So yesterday was a very hard day for us, for my family, for my wife and I. It was a frustrating day. It brought back memories of that very difficult time that Palestine and the Palestinians lived in, where 750,000 Palestinians were driven out of their homes. And 73 years ago, and shortly afterwards, the United Nations decided that there must be a ceasefire and there must be a settlement that would establish a place for Palestinians to live and for the Israelis to live both in peace and security. And that Jerusalem, which is holy to both Jews, Muslims, and Christians, would be an international city. And that resolution was accepted by everyone. That did not happen. And over the decades, what brought on this late catastrophe is that there were a new establishment in a very fine neighborhood called Sheikh Jarrah in Jerusalem, where before they used to bomb homes in order to destroy them. 20,000 homes were destroyed by the Israeli authorities of Palestinians. But now it was emptying the homes and putting settlers in their place. 17,000 families were to be displaced. And it also happened at the time when Ramadan was ending. So people were angry. And they showed their anger by going to the mosque to pray. How do you show your anger by praying? I don't know. But anyhow, and the Israeli authorities decided that this was not very good to have large groups of coming into the mosque. So they entered the mosque and started spraying tear gas and skunk things in the mosque. In addition to that, there were demonstrations in Gaza and in the cities, the Israeli cities where Palestinians still exist as Israeli citizens in Israel, were just angry at what was happening in their area of exiting people from their homes. So that is what created this present catastrophe. So the 2 million people who live in Gaza, who have been in practical open air jail for at least 14 years without a place to escape, started firing rockets at Israel. And Israel, of course, retaliated in such a way which caused that's just damage which is unexplainable, but you can see it on TV. And that caused this new flagration of fire in the region. And the right-wing government of Mr. Netanyahu, who wants to stay in power, this may keep him in power. So I can imagine Netanyahu, who I personally know and do not respect. I would like to say that personally. So this is what caused the current situation. Unfortunately, I heard Mr. Biden say yesterday that he supports Israel, which we all do, and supports their response to the firing of rockets. Unfortunately, Mr. Biden did not mention Palestinians or Palestine. So that also created my desire to go to the garden and put my hands in the soil to ease my frustration and my anger, frankly, and my hurt. So this is in short, to respond to your question, Jean, about the recent, flare-up.
In a few minutes, we're going to invite conversation about the current events, but we have two topics before us. One is what's going on now in Israel, and the other one is a resolution proposed for the United Church of Christ to take action on this summer. The resolution is, there's a link to it on the chat. It is, my question now for you, Rizek, is what do you think of this resolution? Do you think it's helpful for American churches to declare themselves in the Middle East crisis? And is the description and the solutions in this resolution adequate? I will describe them to people if they need, but I'd like to have you describe first your reaction to this attempt to be helpful and influential.
It is Kairos. This is the time of Kairos. What does Kairos mean? It is the right time, an appropriate time in the world today, in the physical world today, to act and resolutely and to act appropriately. And I would just want to bring up to you 12 years ago, Palestinian Christians in Palestine united in creating a Kairos document as well. And this was an extremely important time where the churches had to speak up. And they did. It has not made a dent, actually. They wanted to show the world about what is happening in Palestine. I really urge you to look at it. It's probably very similar to any of the document that you have proposed, which I've read very carefully, making the world realize the injustice and to try to, create a solution that is acceptable. Solutions have been provided, but the main solution that has to be established is a two-state solution on what is, Palestine, 23% of Palestine or 14% or 15% of Palestine. I don't know. That's hard to determine. But there has to be a separation where two states can live within secure borders in dignity and controlling their own people. And no one is a second-class citizen, because the problems that are occurring today in Israel proper, to remind you that there are almost 2 million Palestinians who are full Israeli citizens, who have voting rights as well, but are not first-class citizens. And unfortunately, some months ago, Israel decided to make only the Jews who live in Israel as first-class citizens. The exceptionalism is unacceptable, where all people are treated equally. So this has also created some ill will, and now it's physical outside on the streets of the cities in Israel proper, in Haifa, in Lod, in Nazareth, in Acre, all over Israel today. The Palestinians who are very fluent in Hebrew, who are in very important positions in medicine, in history, in teaching, in every aspect of society, are standing up and saying, we want justice for us. We do not want to be the blacks. We want all people to be equal. We respect the state of Israel. We recognize its independence, but we want to live in the state as equal citizens. So this is creating a lot of difficulty within Israel, where so many Jewish friends of mine are also demonstrating against the government because of what they are doing to the local population. You cannot occupy people in your own country. It seems like they're using the occupation of the West Bank and Gaza to be occupying Palestinian communities in Haifa and in other cities, mixed cities like in Lod and in Akka and Acre and other places. Unacceptable. So this is creating one additional factor to destabilize the situation in Israel. And what it does, it creates anger within the very right-wing Jewish community. And they begin to act like the Proud Boys in this country. They attack, and because they know that the army is not going to do anything to them. Very few of them are arrested, while the demonstrators who are not Jewish are incarcerated very quickly. So this creates that additional thing. I'm saying this because the appropriateness of your declaration, so that it will be accepted and hopefully implemented, is a key, because knowledge about what is really happening is still fragmented, and we need to open it up. We need to let people know, and particularly in the US and within the churches and the synagogues. The majority of the synagogues now in Israel, at least the Reformed synagogues, are also pro-justice and pro-human rights and pro-peace. So this is where we can live together. And the Muslim community within this country is also eager for a settlement, because this has been on people's minds for so long. People have lived and died still hoping and praying. And sometimes prayers are not enough. Jesus said in John 17:21 that they all may be one. Why did he say that? Because people were, even then, 2,000 years ago, were disunited. How can we unite people with decency and humility and honesty? So this is what this document will hopefully do. And I know United Church of Christ is going to be doing this. United Methodists are doing this. The Presbyterians are doing this. And I'm sure every other mainline church is doing it. We are friends with Jewish Voice for Peace. We are friends with J Street. We support them. And they are also looking for some way to make this life more palatable for the people who are living. You know, there are 15 million people living in that region of the world, which is the Fertile Crescent, which is the actual beginning of the world, understanding the world in modern times, even though it happened 5,000 years ago. But still, people were thinking that the world was flat in those days. We have advanced, but we have not advanced in human relations enough. I hate to be speaking about myself, but I have devoted my life to building up understanding and goodwill within the YMCA. And with Jewish and Palestinian people getting together, we have a good kindergarten in the Y, and you visited it, as Jean and all those who visited with us, and saw that the children were innocent. They loved each other, they hugged each other, they spoke each other's language. And we are killing them. Now we're killing them. Unacceptable. This is not what the 21st century is going to be like. And if it happens there, it will happen everywhere. And that's why a document like you're proposing must be fully implemented. And I'm certain that 99.99% of your community will go with it. The suffering of the people is beyond understanding, and it has to end. It has to end, both in this country and everywhere around the world. We are faced with this huge epidemic. Our hearts bleed for India and for Brazil and for those people who die in California. Every day we're losing 50 or more people who died in our state, in Los Angeles County even, so many people. So I recommend highly that this document should be read by all and approved by all. It is the kairos, it is the right time, the appropriate time, which is now, to do it.
Thank you, Rizek.
I took too long to explain myself with this regard, but anyway.
Come back to you in just a minute or two. Keith Tennis asked whether or not we could share screen. The resolution is long, so we're not going to do that. There is a link to the resolution in the chat. Also a link in the announcements that Jane referred to at the beginning of this session. It draws on 50 years of General Synod actions and statements by the United Church of Christ and our global ministry partners, and as Rizek mentioned, many, many denominations. Also in the chat is a link to a current statement put out in the last couple of days by the Churches for Middle East Peace, which is in the form of an appeal to the Biden administration, 4 steps that they must take to address the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And it's a sign-on opportunity on their website to join with the Churches for Middle East Peace in calling for steps to address the current catastrophe and crisis. The statement has been passed unanimously by our local church Board of Mission and Social Action. And next Tuesday, it will be a week from Tuesday, it will be considered by the Church Council. And if you are a member of the Claremont United Church of Christ Church Council or can speak to members of that council, I'm sure you will want to encourage them to help build support for this statement, which will be before the General Synod when it meets in July. I don't think we need to go through the statements. It includes strong support for BDS boycott, divestment, and sanctions. It calls for a change in U.S. policy, including suspension of military aid to Israel until there are basic changes. It's a very strong statement. And as Rizek pointed out, it comes from the exact tradition of the Kairos Palestine famous document, A Cry for Hope, a call for decisive action, which many churches joined in. So now we're going to return to the current moment and to our beloved guest, Rizek, with an opportunity for questions and comments. Obviously, there are many of us on this gathering, and so questions are preferable to lengthy comments, and short comments are much preferable to lengthy comments. But we're now going to have an opportunity to ask Rizek questions. They can be both about the wonderful lives that Rizek and Alice have led in the face of oppression, or questions about what is going on at the moment in Israel, Palestine, Gaza Strip. So the floor is open for a while. And I see John Wolfesberger shaking his hand up at the screen. Go ahead, John, unmute and speak.
There you go. Okay. So in the year 2000, I went on a tour of all of the Palestinian areas, and the Golan Heights to the Gaza Strip, up north in Haifa, the West Bank, Jericho, Nazareth, and Bethlehem, all of these places. And I know that there are a lot of loving Jewish people. We talked to a number of them, but it's such a terrible tragedy that what I saw then still continues. And somehow we have to find a way to speak to the people who answer with violence rather than with love.
Thank you, John. A couple other comments, and then we'll return to Rizek for comment. Natalie.
I too was on the trip with Rizek and Alice, not in 2000, but in 2018. And Rizek, I wonder what you're hearing from your friends there on the ground, both Palestinians and Jewish people. I remember we had a reception of like-minded Jewish Israelis when we were at the YMCA that you hosted in 2018. Both peoples.
Let's collect one or two more comments, and then Rizek, remember what Natalie asked and comment, but a couple more brief questions or comments first, and then back to Rizek. Speak out and unmute yourself and speak out, because it's hard to see hands raised on the screen when there's three screens. Okay, Rizek, would you like to respond to Natalie? Yes. What are you hearing from friends, Israeli friends, Palestinian friends, Jewish friends?
We're inundated with these questions from our friends back home, and we ask them and they respond. We were actually on the phone last night late with my niece who lives in Haifa, and she was born in Haifa. She and her family live in Haifa. Her son is a physician. Her husband is not well, he is in hospital. Her daughter is engaged. And I have two nephews also who live in Haifa who has a thriving business. I have cousins in Akka, in Acre. I have nephews and nieces from them also, second, third, fourth cousins in Nazareth. And they all are worried about where they stand within Israel proper. They are very faithful and loyal Israeli citizens. Yet they feel that being third-class citizens is unacceptable. So justice within that community has to be reached. And it has to be reached not by force of the Supreme Court, but by changing the minds of the very right-wing people who have been emboldened by the right-wing government that has been too long. For the last 12 years, he's been master, and they listen to him. It reminds me also much of the 70 million people who vote for Trump. So this is unacceptable action where they feel, and so do my Jewish friends. We have Rotarian friends who I would give my right arm for, and they would give the right arm for me. And they are so faithful, they're so loving, they're so eager to reach some sort of a settlement that is reasonable and acceptable. All we're asking for is a two-state solution. And let, the boundaries be determined. The land swaps are acceptable to everyone, those in the West Bank and those Palestinians in Israel. One land swap so that there will be contiguity in Palestine and will not disrupt the economy of Israel. I think they're worried about the economy, because if they do give independence to Palestine, their economy would suffer, because today they control completely and totally the taxes and everything that goes on in the occupied territories and Gaza. So it has a portion of the economy will be affected, but it's only money. And I'm sure the US, instead of giving $5 billion for arms, they would give that money for economic reasons rather than for arms. So this is what we're hearing from our Jewish Israeli friends. And they are eager, but again, they are in a minority. Many of them, I can't tell you how many, have opted to leave Israel because they could see no hope in really creating a balanced society, a fair society. They go back to Germany, can you imagine? But they do. Switzerland, Italy, Spain, South America, the US. Yet there are many from the US who come. Unfortunately, the ones who come from the US, the Jewish people who emigrate to the US, are the right wing. And they are the very, very, very right wing people who support blindly Netanyahu and his party. So I'm speaking to Keith Tennis also, his chat. The United Nations resolutions have been thwarted throughout the history. And yesterday, or the day before yesterday, the US stopped the discussion on the issues in Israel-Palestine in the UN Security Council. Why would they do that? What good would it do not to limit discussions on this issue? See, even some of my Israeli friends are saying the court, the court in The Hague should be more active in its determination to really put to test some of the people who should be put in jail for their inhumanity, treatment of inhumans. So, and they also fought BDS, which is an economic thing. BDS is part of your declaration as well, your Kairos. It is important for Israelis who are on the right wing of the issues to learn that this can affect their lifestyle. Continuing this fashion will really affect their lifestyle, economically and socially. I'm sorry to say that the right-wing groups in Israel is growing, which leads me also to say that the right-wing groups in Gaza are growing too. In Gaza, they have nothing to lose. They have lost it all in any event. But in Israel, they have a lot to lose, I'm afraid. So I know that you're limited in time, so I will stop here.
Ron Evans, Jade Heckles.
Thank you, Rizek. We all suffer for and with you and Alice, and all for whom this is a personal and passionate issue. The question that Keith and others raise, if there have been statements written, signed, published, and promoted in the past of the nature of what is now being proposed by the global ministries of the United Church of Christ, the Disciples of Christ, and others. If these have been stated before and ignored, why should we do this now? The answer, I think, is very clear. Our church tradition and our understanding is that we first and foremost do what is right. Efficacy and what is efficient and what is effective is the second category. But for us to do nothing is to do nothing. To do something to add to the record of this is the very least that we can do, but the very least is not an unimportant thing to do. So I'm grateful for the careful wording of this statement, and especially the reminder to everyone that at least, and there are hidden costs beyond this, at least $3.8 billion annually and without reservation come from our government to Israel. And this must be understood and appreciated. And this is a lever that the Secretary of State has. It is if he chooses to use it, and if there is enough pressure on him to act in this way. So what is right, first of all, not necessarily what may be immediately effective.
Our adult education host, Jade Heckles.
As I listen, I'm so aware of the challenge to talk across deep divides. It's certainly been present in our country and continues to be, and it's certainly present within the political landscape of Israel, the state of Israel as well. There's a lot. One of the easiest ways for the right wing to remain in power is to make sure that that gap remains deep and profound. And so we're, always attending to that. As I look at the General Synod resolution, one of the most complex issues that advocates for is the traditional right of return. And Rizek, as I listened to you talk about, the acceptability today in 2021 of a land swap, could you say a little bit about that vis-a-vis the traditional right to return?
In 2002, the United Arab Group decided, it was called the resolution of the United Arabs, 22 states, was that we would accept Israel in its present state of 22% of 78% of Palestine, and we will have resolution with them and normalization.
Guidance restart.
Mel, I think that's your, Mel, yeah, mute, thank you. Go ahead, Rizek. Rizek, now you are muted.
Not mute myself. Anyhow, the resolutions where we accept Israel in its present form of 78% of Israel and 22% for Palestine. If Israel accepts it and establishes Palestine on 22% of their land, and that would be fine. And then we'll have peace. But Israel did not accept this resolution. It was actually placed by the Saudis at the time. And all the Arab states were signed on it. So it is a long story and a long way to reach a proper settlement. But all we're saying is we would like people to know the truth, The truth must be told in all its entirety. And one of the truths is in a film that has just appeared and was nominated for an Oscar. I would like to recommend it to you. It's called The Present, not as a present or past, but as a gift, The Present. It is on Netflix. This film is only 24 minutes long. It sheds light on the occupation of Palestine. And you will see it and you will be sad, but it will also give you a better idea of what truly is happening today. Now, this film received the equivalent of an Oscar in Britain, the BAFTA, I think it's called. And although it was nominated in the States, it was one of the 5 nominated. It did not get the prize, which is fine. But I think the most important thing of this gathering here is for people of your church, Jean, to recognize that Kairos is now. Act now. Let it be known and make the recommendations that have been proposed by Palestinian Kairos so many years ago. But when can this actually make a dent in what is happening today? And that is hard to say. It's an uphill battle run, and we know that. But we must not stop. This is the key. The UN has tried. I was a member for many years of the United Nations Association and have resigned because I can see that there is nothing that our little chapters can really accomplish except push our government here to do the right thing. We want fairness. We want openness. We want human dignity for all. You know, it is unbelievable. But anyway, the most important aspect is the church, because millions of people go to church and listen to what the church is saying. And I hope they listen to the good things that the churches are saying, because some of the churches are promoting other things, which is all connected to money.
A clarification of what the right of return means as promulgated in the famous United Nations document from 1948 called 194. And that is the right of Palestinian refugees to either return to their homes if they choose, or to be compensated for the loss of their property in ways that are consistent with that resolution. So that is a bottom line, essential problem to be solved equitably in any peace settlement, and the refusal to consider it is one of the things that keeps this burning decade after decade after decade.
It's a shame that the Israelis do not look at this in a proper perspective. The proper perspective that there are refugees in Gaza. All they need to do is free Gaza, and the law of return in Gaza is there, because they're there in their own home, but they're not under occupation. The majority of refugees from 1948 and 1967 have settled in other countries and are successful in other countries. I suspect only 10 to 15 or 20% of those refugees out of not in Gaza will come back to their homes. And in the 22% of Palestine, they will be settled in Palestine. I don't accept that they come back to Haifa or to Akka or to Nazareth, but they can be resettled in Palestine, and they will accept that. And they can be compensated. You know, the Jewish people, including friends of mine, are being compensated from Germany even till today, which is fine and acceptable. And Germany has paid up a lot of money for that, for all the guilt. And it's no problem for that. Anyhow, that continues, and Palestinians will get something. We are not asking for any recompense for what we have lost, but it's nothing compared to the others who have lost their lives and their dignity. We have maintained our dignity. So this is the key. Thank you.
We're coming to the end of the time that's available before church starts. I want to say something about the false narrative that we as a church can be wise and informed enough to recognize. And that is that to criticize the occupation or to call it apartheid or to call for peace and justice in the Middle East, the false narrative is that that is always anti-Jewish and anti-Semitic. The narrative is always presented when a church or any other group speaks out in criticism of the Israeli government. This is often a fierce struggle on college campuses. There's a tragic history of real violence and hate and the catastrophe of the Holocaust that Rizek just referred to. But we as a church can love and affirm and be in solidarity with the religion of Judaism and with the Jewish people. We can be very close allies with Jewish organizations and congregations here at home on issue after issue and after issue, and still tell the truth about the treatment of Palestinians. That's what BAMSA is, endorsing in this General Synod resolution. And we'll ask the Church Council to do the same. And I believe that we as a congregation are wise enough to understand that listening to the truth is neither progressive nor conservative, neither left-wing or right-wing. It has to do, as our friend Ron Evans said, with what is true, what is ethically right. And we can do that even in the face of challenges that falsely accuse us of being anti-Jewish. So we're coming now to the conclusion of our time. Is there closing brief comments from anybody before we turn it back to our host, Jane?
May I just say just one sentence is that when you're saying anti-Semitic, I would tell my Jewish friends who are right-wing, when you call anti-Semites, they are actually, you're calling your Arabs, because we're all the Semites. We are all Semites. So when you say that you're anti-Semitic, that you're not only anti-Jewish, but only anti-Arab. So this is the thing. So the misnomer here, anti-Semitic, is wrong. I know the people are anti-Arab and anti-Jewish. That's right. It's their right to be, if they want to be. But to have a general statement that if you're anti-Israel, you're anti-Semitic, is wrong.
Very brief comments from one or two people, and then return it back to our host. Jane, I think it's time for church. The Board of Mission and Social Action appreciates the opportunity to be the leader of today's adult education class. We would love a chance before General Synod to talk about some of the other resolutions that are before General Synod. And we strongly encourage activists in the church to consider attending part or all of the General Synod, which will be taking place July 11 through 18. To find out about it, go to search United Church of Christ on your device, and you'll find General Synod 55 days from now. It's a great thing to sign up for. If finances is an issue, there is a reasonable cost. If finances is an issue, the church wants to help. Okay, Jane, thank you for this opportunity. Rizek and Alice, we love you and are grateful that you are willing to put yourselves out and share your pain and your burden with the rest of us. We're with you. Blessings.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to both of you for talking with us at this Kairos moment, as Rizek has said. May we move forward with wisdom and commitment. The Board of Adult Ed thanks you for your participation today, invites you to come back either live next Sunday at 9 or to look online at the church's YouTube channel for other presentations that have been made. We try to hold a balance between three things as we present adult forums. One is to be in sync with the teaching ministry of the church as exhibited in the preaching series that are going on. Second, to attend to global issues that we need to have greater knowledge of. And third, to respond to the local challenges and issues that are going on in our community from our own faith-based perspective. So thanks to everyone. The recording of this will be available no later than tomorrow at noontime, perhaps a little bit earlier. So thanks, and see you in church.
Thank you, Rizek.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Rizek, Alice, Jane, Jean.
Thank you.